Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback helping clients design and implement cyber plans as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by, where's your name? Slowpoke, Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Well, I'm excited. We're going to talk privacy engineering today.
Yes, it's quite clear you're very excited.
Well, I like happy topics, and privacy is fun, and we have a fun and engaging guest. What's not to be happy about? Sunny outside?
I think, what's driving you today is the weather.
The weather?
I think so.
Well, maybe. Well, so let's get started. Are you gonna kick us off?
No, I'm going to give the con to you.
So kind. Well, today we have Jay Averitt. And Jay began his career as a software engineer and went to law school and practiced for 10 years as a corporate attorney specializing in software license agreements. Jay got exposed to privacy during this time, and it was love ever since. So Jay, we are so excited to talk to you today about the technical side of privacy. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I've always enjoyed your podcast, so it's great to actually be on it.
And you get to see the banter in real life.
It's so much more fun actually seeing your faces there, and I didn't know from listening to the show. I never realized that you guys were actually in the same room. I thought for some reason you'd be split screen, but it makes it so much
this way
fun.
I can elbow, I can pitch, I can do all kinds of things.
She can send me nasty post-it notes.
That's right.
You'll never listen to the show the same ever again. All right, Justin, it's your turn.
It's my turn?
It's your turn.
Okay. Well, Jay, given the introduction we gave you, please tell us a little more about your career journey that led you to your work today.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, I've always loved tech from an early age, and I, asked for a computer when I was like in sixth grade, when computers cost a ridiculous amount and nobody actually had them in their house, and really was into tech. But I also kind of always had some kind of fascination with the law because my dad was in risk management. I was dealing a lot with lawyers, and then for some reason I fell in love with John Grisham books and thought practicing law was actually like a John Grisham book. And so I was kind of straddling on what kind of career I was going to do. And my parents luckily convinced me to actually major in something technology related. Management information systems, did that, and ended out starting out as a software engineer until the bubble started bursting during the dot-com era. And I was like, oh God, there's not going to be software engineers in the future, which crystal ball, that was an idiotic thought. And so I decided to de-risk and go to law school and then look for ways to sort of bridge my technology background with a law degree, which led me to software license agreements, like we said, and which was fun and all, but didn't really feel passion redlining contracts. And really, when I started seeing privacy as a way of using my law degree, but also really getting my hands back on technology. And when GDPR came out, realizing that was something I could actually do um, from an technical operational side and not just as a more on the legal side, I I decided it was a lot of fun. And since I've made that transition, been really happy. And yeah, I'm loving what I'm doing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned John Grisham. That was the book and the author that I loved reading when I was in high school. I've not done very many go to a book signing, but John Grisham came and it was the first time I ever did that. I went by myself and I did musical theater and I had a dress rehearsal that night. The line was so long, it was hundreds of people long. I'm all the way at the back. There was no way I was going to make it. And after hours standing in line, I couldn't not get the book signed. So I had to ask every single person in front of me, hi, I have this dress rehearsal. I'm in the show. I'm not going to talk because he was talking to everyone. I don't know if you've ever done a signing, but he's going to sit and talk and take a photo. Quite lovely, except when you have to go somewhere. So I had to ask every single person so I could get to the front of the line to get his book signed.
Yeah, it's funny that I think that may be the only book signing I've ever been to, and I was my parents actually checked me out of high school to take me to a book signing, and I remember that vividly, and I remember talking. It's funny before the show we were talking about 30A beaches, and in the firm there was a whole part of it that took place in Destin, and I remember talking to him about Destin. No, that's my lone memory of that. So yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it is really funny. Well, all right, let's bring it back to privacy engineering. Maybe not as cool as the beaches, but very important today. So, can you share what privacy engineering is and then how companies of all sizes can include these philosophies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question because it's one that there's not a great answer to, or a lot of people have done a lot of thought answering. I mean, specifically on the definition of what privacy engineering is. A lot of people put a lot of thought into answering that question, and I think the IAPP did a decent job of. They tried to put it in words what privacy engineering was, and I you know, didn't think that was fantastic. But what they did do was put buckets of these are what privacy engineers are doing. And I think that's the hard part of it is there's people doing a huge array of stuff under the privacy engineering umbrella. Like we have people that are creating privacy tools that are really more software engineers with a privacy focus. And then we have people doing more stuff like I do, which is privacy by design work, and actually trying to embed privacy within an organization, and doing technical privacy reviews and things of that nature, calling themselves privacy engineers. And then there's people doing all kinds of things like privacy red team that are actually working on the privacy incident side and trying to predict what people seeking your data would do from an offensive standpoint and attacking from that standpoint. So there's a lot of different privacy engineers doing a lot of different tasks. But I think that also kind of makes it interesting, and that really no matter what your background is, there's probably a place for you somewhere in the privacy engineering umbrella. And maybe one day, like with security, has kind of been spread out, and security engineers are kind of have their specialization, and there's more different classifications. But at the moment, I think there's a lot of room for lots of people in privacy engineering. And I guess that's the definition. The second part of your question was how can privacy engineers come to life in any organization or of any size? I think that's true. I think in the startup sense, privacy engineers really can be helpful in building a privacy program, because a lot of startups may have one privacy counsel or a counsel that's doing sort of privacy work half time, but not really focusing from a program standpoint. And from a program standpoint, the main thing I would say is one, figuring out where your data is in the first place to actually build out a program from there. And then two, once you're actually doing further development, have privacy actually be consulted and have a voice at the table early on in the design process of new application development. So that way, you're not at the 11th hour and then asking privacy to sign off on something. Instead, privacy could be considered early and then baked into the design itself. So, even any organization could really benefit from having a privacy engineer work on that, even if it's just one.
You're just staring at me.
Why not? So, Jay, as you talked about privacy engineering and how you work with cross-functional teams, how have you found success working across these functional teams with competing priorities? And as we've known, privacy is usually an afterthought, not a core design feature.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think the issue that I have is probably the same as you've experienced. Is that um, you know a lot of engineers are not thinking about privacy early on in the process, just as I articulated. So when they're bringing a design to me and saying, hey, they want me to just say, hey, this looks good, let's go forward with it. So you really got to build those relationships, and I think that's really starts with um, you know s- making them realize that you're all trying to achieve the same goal. I'm a huge fan of technology and innovation. I want my company's products to be the best products out there. I don't want to slow down the process. I would just want my company's products to be the best. And baking privacy on into that process, you're actually, I think, creating world class products because you want your customers to really trust your product. And with that, if you haven't contemplated privacy early and you haven't thought through all the ramifications and you just kind of did some kind of last minute privacy consult, you probably haven't, built world class privacy into your product. So if you can do that, then you have the potential of say customers saying, hey, my company, this company really cares about privacy. And that's important to me, and I want to support that company. And you've built that customer trust. So I think, I think the best way of doing it is actually showing how you can be a value add to engineering and work with that. I mean, from the legal standpoint, working with lawyers, I mean, I think most lawyers that I've ever worked with in technology companies, and when I worked as a lawyer, I mean, I never wanted to say, "Hey, legal killed this," because that's you're not going to survive very long if you're the person in legal killing a bunch of deals. Because, I mean, let's face it, companies need to bring money in the door, and if legal's killing a bunch of deals, that's not great. So I think it's exactly the same. Is just showing, hey, we've got to ensure that all legal regulations are followed, but how can we do that in a way of you know not hindering what we're trying to do from our release cycle? And I think the best way of doing that is bringing everybody in early on in the process.
Jay, I'd love if you could maybe think about an example where you can share what your role was, maybe how if there was a privacy counsel or an operations person and whomever else might be there, and how everyone had their unique role but was working together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I do almost every day in a technical privacy review, where an engineer, like I'll give you uh, a very close to real life example. An engineer is trying to bake some AI into an existing application, and wants to enter a prompt or something into an application where an LLM is being consulted to find the answer. What can you do to ensure that that privacy is actually being considered with that rollout? Well, the engineer really just wants to get this done because they're under the gun of, hey, management has said we need to get all this out the door as fast as possible, and legal's thinking, hey, crap, this is AI, and there's a lot of stuff that is going down the road with AI. We want to make sure that everything is there. And then I'm thinking, sort of the same as legal, that look, from a privacy standpoint, we really can't forget about privacy fundamentals when it comes to AI, and let's figure out how we're going to ensure that all privacy fundamentals are put in this, while understanding that, look, this is stuff that is extremely hot right now, and we want to get out the door as quickly as possible. So, I mean, I think I worked with legal to figure out what their view is in terms of, hey, are we is what we're doing from for example, what we're doing from a document retention standpoint, compliant with the GDPR or CCPA or whatever the privacy reg was for the geo that we were rolling this out in. And then, I'm looking at it from a overall privacy standpoint. Are we doing things that we should from a privacy principle standpoint? Like, are we considering data minimization and not storing additional information that we don't need? Are we being clear and transparent to our users about what data we're actually collecting? So things like that are the stuff that I would be considering in that, and then working with the engineers to figure out a way to implement those privacy controls without pushing the release cycle way down the line.
So helpful. I really appreciate you sharing those extra details. Now, your LinkedIn banner says that you are a privacy evangelist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, once I found privacy, I just fell in love, and I think what I love about it is that I feel like I know a thing or two about privacy, but the more I learn, the less I feel like I know, because there's always some new regulation coming out, or there's always some new technology. Like LLMs and AI has been around for a while, but it certainly wasn't something that I was thinking about every single day up until last year. And so that's something new that I had to learn and think about. So I love privacy because it just really satisfying the lifelong learner in myself. And I like to try to spread what little bit of knowledge I have out to everyone else, because I just feel like that, especially right now, I feel like privacy is in a spot that maybe security was 10 years ago, where people think about cybersecurity now. Yeah, even individuals think about cybersecurity. They think about, hey, maybe not everyone is using the absolute best passwords out there, but people are at least cognizant that they should be thinking about that. And things like your phone rolling out, suggesting super strong passwords and stuff. Security is definitely maturing to the point that it is being contemplated. Whereas I think, yes, there are some people that hear about big data breaches and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's bad, but that's also not something that they're just thinking about in their daily lives. And so, whatever I can put out there to make people actually think about privacy, both as consumers and as organizations, that this is something that you should really be considering, I think is what I'm trying to do to get the message out there.
You have lots of passionate messages, Mr. Justin. Seems like you could relate.
I can.
And lifelong learner.
I think in this day and age, you're either a lifelong learner or you're obsolete.
It's probably true. Yeah, I mean, it's you're not going to if you stuck in what you learned 10 years ago, then good luck.
Yes, I've had many a fun evening understanding what Microsoft Copilot is.
We appreciate all the great work that you're doing for us, Jay.
Yes. So, privacy can be at the same time really hard, but also simplified, like certain people try to do.
Mhm.
What can privacy pros, from your perspective, do to help make companies compliance with privacy laws easier?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because I mean, I think the alphabet soup of privacy, like GDPR, ROPAs, DPIAs, and all of that makes everything seem super complicated from a privacy standpoint. And, you know, to be honest, like a lot of the questions that I'm asked, I don't have clear answers on, and I don't think anyone really has clear answers on because they're questions that are they're not answered by the GDPR, they're not answered by anyone, and it's really you're using your judgment to analyze what the privacy regs may say, or just analyze what best practices are from a privacy standpoint. So there's no clear answers on that, but I guess from why I think it can be easy is if you look at the underlying principles of privacy. I mean, it's pretty much common sense. Like, hey, data minimization, fancy word for just like let's not take stuff we don't need from a data standpoint. I mean, let's if you don't need somebody's full address and social security number, why are you collecting all this information and what are you going to do with it? Then maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And things like that. I mean, I think um, just really common sense instead of like breaking through all of this alphabet soup and what various privacy regs say. Yeah, those are important. You need lawyers to actually understand that and all that. But a lot of it is just like, let's look at privacy principles, which even those words can be complicated. But really, it's okay. I mean, a lot of times when I'm looking at a privacy problem, the way I look at it is okay, if I'm the user of this product, is what they're doing from a privacy standpoint going to be something that I find unacceptable? And if I find it unacceptable, then probably most users are going to find it unacceptable. So, looking at things like that, which I mean, I think fairness and transparency, those are principles baked into the GDPR. But they're just also common sense. Like you shouldn't be rolling something out that is going to anger your customers and you think big companies look at things like user sat, and that's something they're looking at in everything. But really, making sure that they're okay with your users are okay with the privacy should be 101 in that user sat.
Building upon what you just shared with some of those basics, which I really agree with you. Obviously, there's nuances to all the laws that people want to pay attention to. But at the same time, if you boil it down, there's some really simple concepts in there. Using that as a baseline, what do you think every privacy pro should be practicing in their role?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of it is really what I've said before is shifting privacy left in the software development life cycle. Just having privacy talk to as applications are being developed. That can solve so many problems because, I mean, problems tend to bubble up when engineering has worked super hard on this release and they're about to roll it out. And then privacy at the last minute is saying, hey, you've got a big problem here. And I mean, nobody wants to be have their innovation stopped there at the 11th hour and re-roll it back and fix it. And it's going to be much more costly and more expensive to sit there and try to rework something than if, hey, we came early on in the process, we talked to privacy, and privacy told us this, and we're working. They may ignore it, and you may still might be having to have some of these 11th hour discussions. But if your organization values privacy, I mean, chances are, and most engineers, I'd say they're not, against privacy. Most of them just aren't thinking about it because they're just not wired into what they're thinking about. So once they understand the issue, they're like, okay, cool. We'll try to work that into our design. So I think that's the first step is really um, is just doing that from a simple, and then yeah, I mean, just fundamentally uh, looking at data minimization and just overall fairness. And if you're actually evaluating something from a privacy standpoint, um, like I just said, don't collect stuff you don't need, and then try to treat others like you want to be treated. And if you don't want to be treated that way, then you might be okay under the GDPR or CCPA. Probably a lot of things are that are seemingly okay from a legal standpoint that you maybe should just not be doing because you don't think it's fair. And I think that is going to create more trust for your customers and ultimately help the company down the line.
Jay, have you ever had an experience where you wanted to do the right thing? Because I think many of our listeners agree. And the people that they have to work with are not really open to hearing what they have to say. And I'm wondering if you have an experience where you were able to convince someone to really listen to the privacy risks that you were trying to present. And if there might be a learning, what made you successful to be able to convince that person to listen or to perhaps change course?
Yeah, I mean, you have that a lot. But I'd say like, I mean, sometimes, you will want to say, hey, this is a problem from a privacy standpoint. The engineers or product managers or whoever you're working with will be like, well, way off the chain, this has got to roll out. Privacy can't be an issue. And at the end of the day, a lot of legal problems and privacy problems are more of a risk decision than an absolute stopper. And some executive up the line is going to make the call of, hey, this is a risk we can live with. And you've got to educate that executive on what the potential risks are. And I think privacy, the GDPR actually gives you a pretty good tool to make the executives aware of the risk. When you come to them and say, hey, look, your risk is 4% of your revenue, then that's going to make them listen. And which I don't. That's not the weapon that I want to yield first, but that does tend to get an executive to listen. Is you don't want to be found breaching the GDPR. I mean, that's just not something you want to do. So, I mean, that is one way of doing it. But I mean, I think um, a lot of it is just what I've been talking about before is okay, yeah, I get that we don't want to slow down this release, but let's talk about what will happen if we alienate our customers and we lose trust with our customers by not considering privacy. You may not, I mean, chances are, I mean, there's so many, I think, egregious privacy issues out there that no regulator is going to touch because, I mean, there's not enough time. Our regulators aren't seeing everything out there, and depending on the size of the company, they just may not be going after it. So that you may not get hammered by some regulator, but you could have a 23andMe situation where your entire revenue just goes down the tubes because you've lost trust with your customers. So I mean, I think you can. I think that those are the two weapons. If you've got to use that, dagger of the GDPR, and that's the only way they're going to listen, fine. But I think the trust angle is the better angle because I mean that's actually the more likely harm that you're going to cause.
I couldn't agree more.
So, what is your favorite privacy tip to share when you're hanging out with friends at a party?
Yeah. Well, I try to avoid, even as a privacy evangelist, I don't like boring my friends and family, and they don't. tend to, even most of them don't. My wife, I think, has a decent understanding of what I do, but 90% of the people I come into contact with don't know what privacy does. But I think my favorite tip actually is, I mean, I get super annoyed when I get my phone number out somewhere and I start getting random text from things like, I saw my wife's phone the other day. She goes to some spa and like they're texting, "Hey, this is your reminder that Botox is coming up," or something like that. And I was like, "This is a real bad privacy problem that your phone is constantly, trying to solicit you for Botox and stuff like that." So, I feel like you should kind of safeguard your cell phone number, and the problem with that is everyone asks for it. So what do you do? I mean, I think Google Voice or some other voice over IP where you can give a phone number out and you can check that phone if you want to see all these solicitations for Botox and all what other Southern Tides having a sale or whatever. You can check all of that, but you don't have to be bombarded with a ton of text or text you're having to unsubscribe from all the time. So I think, one, using a Google Voice or something like that, and then just having an email dedicated to hand out to anything other than super important communication. I mean, I have a Gmail address that I use for super important communication, but I also have another email address that I'm going to give out, whenever I'm making any kind of online transaction.
And Jay, when you are not talking and practicing privacy, what do you like to do for fun?
I like to play tennis. It's like you were mentioning, the weather is actually finally getting better, so the sun is shining. So excited about going back and playing some tennis because it's been a couple months. But yeah, I mean, I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, so they are keeping me busy during the weekends. But it's also a lot of fun to go to my son's basketball games and just hang out and enjoy life with 2 young kids.
Well, we're so grateful that you came and joined us today. Where is the best place for people to connect with you?
I mean, LinkedIn is what I use to evangelize privacy. I actually worked at Twitter and was on X, but I can't even figure out how to get back into my account after I left there. So not on there anymore. But LinkedIn, happy to connect with anybody out there. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.